Good evening, everybody. It's nice to be with you again. Last week we went through Parshas Pinchas. We were told how he earned his Cohenship from bringing peace to Israel, settling a big problem. And then we finished off with the laws of the Chagim, the festivals. Sukkot, we mentioned how the water drawing ceremony, if you haven't been through the water drawing ceremony, you haven't really experienced true joy in life. We went into Rosh Hashanah, where we thank Hashem again for granting us an extra opportunity to cancel our debt to Him. This week's Parsha starts off, as it ends off last week, with the laws of Yom Tovim. This one begins with the laws of vows. How I usually introduce this Parsha is, don't take a vow. A Jew should be very careful about vowing, promising, any kind of neder or shvua, oath or vow, that they should be very careful in making one. The Torah starts off actually saying that when a man makes a vow, he's got to keep his word. The first whole paragraph is on that. If it comes out of his mouth, he should do it. And of course it goes for women as well. Any Jew who makes a vow should keep their word. In fact, it follows also from last week's Parsha that if you intended to or made a vow to bring a korban, then you had to obviously do it when it came to the festival where you had to bring your korban to the Beis HaMikdash. There's some very interesting stories how people shouldn't make vows. We're going to make it very short tonight. There's a lot of fireworks outside. It's the 4th of July, whatever that means. It's good that people celebrate good independences. You can hear it maybe in the background. Boom, boom, boom. So if a person makes a promise, they must keep it. And they shouldn't take vows or promises lightly. Now, there's a very famous story about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was the head, as we know, he was saved, he came out of the coffin, and he started a new yeshiva, and after meeting Vespasian, the great big Roman general who became the emperor, the Caesar of Rome. But a small story about that period was, it came to him, excuse me, that a man called Rabbi Shimon Antipater used to invite guests, which is a big thing as we know in Judaism. You must be hospitable, invite guests, look after them properly, feed them properly. The food was very good tonight, by the way, thank you. This Shimon Antipater used to invite guests, and the stories came back to the stages, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, that he used to beat up his guests when they left, to give them a good hiding. So he tells Rabbi Yehoshua, call on him and report back to us. Of course, if Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai picked someone to call on somebody, he picked, Rabbi Yehoshua was a giant Talmid Chacham. So he goes to Shimon Antipater, and he goes there for dinner. The guy said, come in, welcome, and they start discussing Torah. And the Rabbi Yehoshua expounds so beautifully on Torah, and they sit down to a meal, and during the meal they discuss a few points on Torah, and this goes on. The meal is sumptuous, an incredible meal. And at the end of the meal, eventually, Rabbi Yehoshua says, well, I've got to be going back to Yavneh. Who will escort me? So Rabbi Shimon ben Antipater says, of course I will. And he's a bit nervous because he's heard about all these beatings that happened with all these people. And eventually they come to part, and Rabbi Shimon ben Antipater says to Rabbi Yeshua, have a good journey, Hashem should protect you. I thank you for a beautiful night of Torah. He says, thank you very much for the wonderful hospitality. And he's waiting, nothing happens. And he calls him back, he says, I heard, it came to me, I've come to especially to see you, that apparently you entertain these guests very well and then you beat them up. He says to him, yes, he says, because they make silly vows. I'm not going to eat much. And they eat like anything. I won't drink. And they drink 4 bottles of wine. He says, and you shouldn't take vows lightly. So he says, so I'll give them a hiding. He's heard that if somebody doesn't keep their word, they deserve a few patshas. So he said, but you are a Talmid Chacham. And he says, good journey. So Rabbi Yeshua says to him, you're right, you actually should perhaps do it. And maybe I should also help you. He said, thank you very much. And he went back to report to Rabbi Shimon ben Zakkai. It's an interesting story, but the gist of it, Midrashim are there to really teach you lessons, more than anything else probably. It's like a parable to teach you to understand not to make vows lightly. That's why the Midrash uses this kind of story at this time, in this type of parsha, particularly in this parsha. Wow, fireworks. Anyhow. So, then last week we learned, and the week before from Balak and Bilam, how they trapped the Jewish people into immorality. And we know Hashem hates immorality. And that's why Pinchas stopped the plague that broke out after the immorality began. And the Midianites planned with the Moavim to hurt the Jews. As we said, that Bilam and Balak, they did it. They really owed so much to the Jews. The Jews weren't coming to fight with them. They weren't coming to argue with them. So, did I give this example last week where it led up to the 6-day war thing? The same kind of thing. He heard that the Midianites were going, Moshe was told the Midianites were planning to attack them and come and try and kill all the Jews. And he said, Hashem tells Moshe, this time get him first. A preemptive strike, a preemptive war. And that's what happened. They went in and they really gave it to the Midianites. And I like to always give you an example how, unfortunately, these pharaohs and Hamans and Hitlers, Yamach Shemor, don't stop with the Jewish people. When will they learn? I hope soon. But it hasn't happened. History repeats itself again and again. We just heard that Morsi's just been kicked out of Egypt as the president, prime minister of Egypt. Bad man, head of the Muslim Brotherhood, took over from not a good guy. Their whole world runs like that. But I'm not a politician, and it's just to give you an example how this thing against the Jews has not stopped all these years, and hopefully it will soon. It's interesting that 12,000 people went out to meet the Midianites. 12,000 soldiers. Handpicked, of course, and from totally dedicated. And they beat hundreds of thousands of Midianites. The same thing happened in the 6-day war. Egypt alone outnumbered Israel greatly. They had Syria on their side. It's happened again and again. This incident that we're talking about, the Midianites, happened 3,300 years ago. And the world has still not learned to stop starting with us. Especially for no reason. There's never really been a reason to start with us. Never. We've tried to contribute to society with our Torah. And the job that we should do, and have done pretty well throughout history, we have to continue. And that's to teach them, the nations, and ourselves, to stick to what we have to do, and teach the nations to do what they should do. Be decent human beings. To be a good Jew, you have to be a decent human being. You have to be a good citizen of the world. You have to contribute. And we always have. And we should continue to learn our laws, that we were able to contribute to world peace, world happiness, and hopefully Mashiach soon in our time. I'm not going to go on tonight much because I know that everybody's keen to do a lot of other things. The tribes were, there's an interesting story also that perhaps I should tell you about, I've got it here, I saw it the other day, and let's see what, yeah. To show you how careful one should be about vows, I'm going to tell you one story of a midrash, and then we'll say, okay, for tonight, we'll just wind up what it means, the value. As I said, a midrash always has a theme, a lesson for us to learn. Nebuchadnezzar was a very, very powerful emperor, and he ruled the ancient world with an iron rod. Now, Tzidkiyahu, who was the king of Israel at the time, the Jewish people, the king of the Jewish people, was such an elegant man, he knew how to help Nebuchadnezzar run the country even better. So, and as many times has happened, Abarbanel in the time of Frederick and Isabella of Spain, Chistai ibn Shaprut earlier on in the in the middle 9th century, going into the early 10th century, what he did for the kings and rulers that he worked under, whether it was Khalif or king, the Jews served the country well, and they still do. Thank God. So anyhow, Nebuchadnezzar knew that Tzidkiyahu was a great asset to his kingdom. So he let him, he was the only one free to walk the palaces like Abarbanel used to do with Frederick and Isabella of Spain. 3,000 years ago approximately, 2,500 years ago approximately, Nebuchadnezzar allowed Tzidkiyahu free reign in the palace to walk into any room he liked at any time, and he made him really king over the other tribes that Nebuchadnezzar had conquered, people particularly like Moab and Ammon and Sidon and so on, Edom of course, and so on and so forth. Zon, excuse me. So he, as I said, he was a very cruel man, and he had very, very harsh habits. Now, there's a law that we are supposed to teach the nations of the world. There are 7 Noahide laws that we teach the world. One is to set up courts of laws that are just, that all people should treat each other properly, and if they don't, there should be a decent legal system, courts of law, where the nation should live by and live in a better society. And that's one of the things we have taught them, and thank God they have learned, like a place like America, thank God the courts are pretty good. The basic constitution here is excellent. The laws are really in the main very good. Yes, most of the good laws have been borrowed from us. Most of the laws have been borrowed from us. But it's good. That's what we're there to do. We're there to teach them these laws. So anyhow, to get back to our story, Tzidkiyahu was walking through the palace one day, and he went into a room, and he saw Nebuchadnezzar taking a live rabbit, a live hare, and ripping it apart and eating it. He killed it with his hands and started eating it. Now, this isn't allowed to the nations. We're supposed to teach them not to be cruel to animals. One of the laws of the 7 Noahide laws, not to be cruel to animals. Of course, you can't murder, you can't steal, adultery, etc. is out, not good. And he saw him doing this law that is against what the nations are not allowed to do. Hashem laid down laws for Noah, the Noahide laws. And Nebuchadnezzar sees him and he says, "Swear to me, make a vow that you'll never ever tell anybody about this happening." So Tzidkiyahu makes a vow. Now, Judaism is very, very beautiful. There are times when you can make vows. You shouldn't. As I said, the main thing is don't make vows. Don't promise. Don't make vows. Don't make oaths. But if you do, for example, you make an oath to yourself and say, Hashem, or to Hashem, that I'm not going to... You have a terrible tendency towards alcohol. You know you could be an alcoholic. I'm not going to drink except for a glass of wine on Friday night. Then you must keep the vow. As I said, you have to keep your word. So, he tells Tzidkiyahu, and he knows Tzidkiyahu is honorable. Nobody must hear of this. So Tzidkiyahu regretted later on making this vow. Why he did, I can't give you an answer. But he did. And he went to the sages, and they annulled his vows. Now you can annul a vow under certain circumstances. You can go to the sages and they can find just reasons why one can not carry through on their promise. And what happened was, he went to the sages and they annulled the vow. Then he was talking to the kings of like Moab and Edom and Ammon, etc., Sidon, and he's they're talking, you know how people get to do it, and they like trapped him. They were talking about Nebuchadnezzar, and they said to him, you, Tzidkiyahu, should really be the ruler. Look what a man you are. Look how you run the kingdom. Look what an asset you are to all the people in this whole, our world, the realm that Nebuchadnezzar rules. And they're talking to him, and he slips. He says, they said he's such a brutish man, he's rough, he's cruel, and Tzidkiyahu slips. He says, yes, and he tells them the story of this devouring the rabbit. Immediately the 5 kings sent letters to Nebuchadnezzar about what Tzidkiyahu had said, and said, it's treason. Those days off of the head very quick. But Nebuchadnezzar had to see, should he punish many more or just Tzidkiyahu? So he calls in the sages and he says to them, teach me your Torah. And they start off one parsha, and it's all beautiful laws, how a person should behave, how he should be good and kind and considerate. And he's going through, yes, and he's going through all the laws and all the until he comes to this parsha, Matot Masei, which is a double parsha this week coming up. And he gets the sages in front of him. He says, tell me about this Matot Masei and vows, Can you annul a vow? And they tell him yes. If they go to the sages, you can annul a vow. He realizes now it can be done. So he took the sages that had annulled the vow and he tied them by their hair to horses and dragged them from Yerushalayim to Lord and killed them over the rough stones. And it's a horrific thing to do, but the lesson to us is very clear. It's what we've been talking about all the time. Don't make vows. Don't make vows. If it's a one where you can, okay. And Rosh Hashanah, we know we annul our vows. And Yom Kippur, it starts off, Kol nidrei v'nesochrei u'shavuei, all vows and promises that I made, forgive me, may they be annulled. Let me start a new sheet. Let me start afresh. Hashem, help me to live even a purer life. And that's the real message for tonight. Thank you.